So I want to welcome you to this conversation about how that we will be digital church as we come out of the worst of the pandemic. So welcome again. It's good to see regulars and old friends and new folks with us today. Our presenter today is Pastor Keith Anderson of Upper Dublin Lutheran Church. Keith began his ministry there in 2012, and we've been very excited to have him on our territory, and he's been very generous sharing his insights and expertise with our synod, as well as around the church at large through organizations like Virginia Theological Seminary. Keith earned his MDiv from Harvard in 2000 and his STM in Lutheran Studies from what used to be the Lutheran Theological Seminary in Philadelphia in 2002. And he's the author of The Digital Cathedral, Networked Ministry in a Wireless World. And he's co-author with Elizabeth Drescher of Click to Save Reboot, the Digital Ministry Bible, which you can find at book places everywhere. So with that introduction, Keith, we'll turn it over to you.
All right. Yeah, it's not out of print quite yet, so it's still around. Great to be with you, everybody. I see more people joining and see some familiar names. Thanks for coming. And if you haven't already and you want to share where you're joining us from and your kind of ministry context, I'd love to kind of have a sense of that. And I'm going to present for a stretch here. And then we'll have lots of time for questions and answers, and I'll do the best I can. Always nice to know that people aren't totally sick of hearing me talk about digital ministry, so I appreciate everybody being here. And thanks to Bob and the Synod for inviting me. This morning, a friend of mine shared an article from NPR today, or this week. It said, if your brain feels foggy and you're tired all the time, you're not alone. And it's kind of the fatigue or burnout we've been experiencing with all these different rounds of COVID. And so I'm very aware that we're all in our own ways grappling with it. And I certainly, I think, go from times of kind of excitement about kind of possibilities that are in front of us, and also very tired too. So it's kind of holding those two things together. So I think you're going to hear a lot of things from me, or the things I'm excited about, but I'm right there with you in terms of like, wow, here we go again. You know, we're figuring out the next phase of the pandemic, which is the best phase that we've had to deal with thus far. But nonetheless, it's like another series of changes that we have to navigate. And today I'm going to talk about what I think is coming next, or I can just, I'll be talking from our own perspective here at our church, the things we're thinking about, the things that we're working on or trying to work on, and the steps we're taking and thinking about where this might be going, and have some examples and some folks that I think are worth watching in terms of the way that they're doing those things. So I'm going to share my slide and share my slides, and we can get started. And all right, is that coming across okay? Bob, is that, yep?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this question we're all asking, what's next? What's coming up? And I'll just give it my best shot about thinking about how we're moving forward post-pandemic in this digital and hybrid environment. This past week, I came across an article from Carey Nieuwhof, who maybe a number of you probably read already, talking about changes in church and trends. And he had this good article on the coming church split. It's not what you think. And he talked about 4 different kind of elements of kind of where he sees churches diverging and kind of either growing and moving forward or not. One of those things was around digital ministry. And so in that section, he said, for a lot of pastors, not just pastors, but ministry leaders, online church lies somewhere between a necessary evil and unfortunate necessity, or a service they offer that's an option for people who can't get there for the real thing. In all likelihood, those church leaders are going to have a difficult future ahead of them. There's a smaller group of pastors and leaders, though, who are fully embracing a hybrid church model, deciding to become 100% physical and 100% digital. Um, and they see digital not as an accommodation, but as both real ministry and an abundant opportunity. Forward-thinking pastors and ministry leaders realize that the best answer to the question, should ministry be digital or physical, is yes. And one response you could have to that is like 100 plus 100 equals 200. I don't have 200% to give. I probably don't even have 100% to give, maybe at this moment with everything we've been through with the pandemic. But hopefully, sort of I'll describe, that's not kind of what I'm asking for myself or anybody else. But how do we find ways to blend these two things? It's through the pandemic, we've been doing like a lot of in-person plus a lot of digital. And we're going to have to find this kind of hybrid blend that is more manageable moving forward, that's more sustainable moving forward. But I do think, and he puts this in kind of like a little starker terms, but I think it probably is a time for starker terms, to say it's really not whether we do this at this point, but how we do this. I've been talking about digital ministry. I guess I've been practicing digital ministry since 2008, and I've been talking about it since 2010, so almost 11 years. And I've seen churches make more progress in the last year and a half than they had in 10 years out of necessity, because we had to do it, and we had to do it for the sake of our people and the congregations we serve and the communities we serve. So I really give everybody so much credit and thanks for all the hard work that we've had to do. It would have been nice to have kind of been doing it in a more gentler, easier fashion, but we've had to do what we had to do, and now here we are on the other side of that. And I know there's such an urge, and I feel it in myself, to go back to, let's like snap back to the way things were. We knew how things worked then. And I know our people are probably, a lot of the people we serve are feeling that way too. And this is a really important moment to pause and say, what have we learned? What do we want to carry forward? What do we want to grow in? What can we leave behind? Whether those were kind of digital things that didn't work for us in this period of time, or things we were doing before the pandemic that we realized we can do in different ways, or didn't serve us as well as we thought they were serving us. And so COVID really accelerated everything for us in terms of digital adoption, digital skills, and not just the skills that we learned as ministry leaders, but the skills for like our congregations, right? So we could have been trying different digital things and doing different things and learned how to use Zoom, but if our people weren't willing to learn to use Zoom, we weren't going to be able to get there. But now everybody's, both leaders in the church, professional leaders, staff leaders, lay leaders, lay members, we've all just had to get up to speed on a lot of things and ways to connect. So like I said, the amount of progress we've made in the church and in difficult circumstances has been really remarkable. We're also seeing challenges related to, right? We were already having challenges related to attendance. Now what does attendance look like? How do we think about that when we're doing hybrid, right? Maybe we were having challenges related to, and there's certainly in the larger trend of the larger church, right? Challenges with membership. What does membership look like now? And what does that mean now when people can attend our churches from all over the country or all over the world? And the financial challenges and trends that the church is facing. And COVID certainly had an impact on congregations in that way. And, we've been kind of at this point of thinking about what is a sustainable financial model for the church for the future. And digital is not like maybe it's part of the answer to that, but it's not the whole answer to that. But so some of these trends, attendance, membership, giving, some of these things that we're experiencing, COVID accelerated. It also accelerated our ability to be, I think, more flexible, more nimble, to connect with a larger group of people. Like I'm sure you're experiencing too, like with live streaming, we get people that we've never met before live streaming and joining us for worship now. So we've added skills, we've added experiences. This is giving us an opportunity to say, what serves us and what doesn't, because we've taken a break from a lot of the things we would normally do over the course of the last year plus. So it's been a challenge for us, and we kind of feel the headwinds even more, probably, but it's also helped to move us forward. Um, so I'm just going to talk of kind of a number of aspects that are at the top of my mind, and we're like presently working on in my context, and share that with you. So the changing church office and institutionalizing our progress. So we've really had to make do over the last year and a half with how we do digital things. A lot of people, like a lot of you, like ministry leaders, have been recruited into, what do you know how to do? What do you feel comfortable doing? So pastors have had to take on like video editing or Zooming and all kinds of things. Staff members who may not have normally done those kinds of digital projects, kind of got pulled into that. I talked to a lot of youth ministers who became like suddenly the most important person on their staff because they knew how to operate a lot of the digital technologies. So we've had volunteers that have stepped in. So everybody just rallied around to figure out how do we do this and taking stuff on. Now I think we're starting to be at the point of saying, well, that's not going to work forever. How do we bring people into this? How do we institutionalize these processes, these changes? And for years upon years, my last church and this church, it's just kind of been clear for quite some time that the church office was going to be something that was going to be changing to reflect the ways that we connect, that we communicate, right? So moving from more of a secretarial type structure to a very print oriented structure to now being a more digital oriented, communications oriented structure. So definitely kind of, again, for years thought this is going to be the case at some point. And I think we're coming to the point where we're coming to that point. So I think, so here's the copier, like, we had 2 copiers. I don't even know why we had 2 copiers when we had 2 copiers, but it was like the lease was up and it was like, we're going down to 1. We're just going to become less print oriented than we were before. Based on what we've learned through live streaming, this place used to be kind of a bulletin factory. We have 3 services on Sunday, 3 different bulletins. Like that thing is just churning out all week. And, we do have screens in our sanctuary. So we're definitely moving to more of a digital first and then print, as opposed to print and then digital. And we're kind of figuring out what those systems look like now, because the old system was really well honed. So we're working that out as we go. But, I think one of the things we need to do is increase our digital capacity. So for professional church leaders, one thing you might want to think about is using continuing education time or resources to learn digital skills. A few years ago, I did an online class about video editing, which kind of turned out to be a good thing that I had done. And it was kind of a learn as you go kind of a module type class. There, I don't know, 24 units, you could go at your own pace, and then you have the class forever. So I took some continuing ed funds and time and signed up for that class and learned to do video editing. I was kind of a novice and beginner, and got a little better at it as I went. So we don't usually think about continuing education in terms of like digital skills, but I think more and more that's going to be something that we need to pay attention to. And there are just a lot of free offerings, webinars kind of all over the place too. So it doesn't necessarily need to cost money, it just might cost a little bit of your time. So for current staff members, thinking about providing some training, like we've kind of gotten up to speed to a point. How can we help people to be more comfortable in terms of, and then kind of understanding the why is this kind of hybrid? Why does this matter? Why should we do it? Either whether it's serving our people that are already in our church or connecting with people who are beyond our church. So why do we do this, why we continue to do this now that COVID is over, and how do we do this? So how can we equip our staff? How can we enlist volunteers to help with digital tasks? Maybe of you, we've certainly done this, and maybe some of you have as well. But I will say, like, people say that a lot, and it's just really important to be selective. Not everybody can do every technological thing, and just because somebody is under 30 or 35 doesn't mean they know all the tech things, and especially in like kind of in a ministry context. So I think it's important to draw on the resources that are present in our congregations, but I also do think it's kind of important to be a little selective about that as well. It's sort of like when I think about finance, for instance, finance is one thing to me. Like I had like in a finance meeting say like, there are different types of finance. There's like accounting and there's investing and all these things. And I just see it as finance. And I would say the same thing about digital ministry, that we think about digital as all the same kind of ball of stuff, and it can be quite different. And then we may need to seek new staff and contract workers to help us fill in the gaps that should be gaps, and take the burden off of either the pastoral leadership, staff leadership. And I would say, people will say a lot. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. People will say a lot. We don't have the time, money, or resources to do that. And I would just say, like, we should be investing in digital like we have with print. We've invested a lot in print, in a kind of a print-oriented way of being, culture, resources, machines, paper, right? Like if you just think of, we've lived in this kind of, print culture for 500 years since Gutenberg and Martin Luther. So we're accustomed to that. We invest a lot of money in that kind of type of technology. So what are the ways that we recognize the importance of that investment? What are ways we can look at the investment in digital technology as something akin? And maybe, there's a transition that's happened where we're kind of supporting both of those until we kind of transition a little bit more to digital. But, it's you just need to think about it like we would not produce our bulletins on Sunday morning. So why would we shortchange ourselves with our website, with our email, with our YouTube, with our equipment that we use that can make better quality images, or video, and make life easier for us to manage it. So that's just an investment in some way, in some level, that we're going to have to make, even if it's just an investment of our time. I think at the same time, we really have to be aware that this creates a lot of anxiety and produces stress and worries about relevance. Digital stuff really pushes a button for people, because many of us perhaps aren't trained in it. It's not our first language. And so we don't know how to do something, and we feel like we should, or we feel dumb about it. We wonder, are we relevant now because these things are all happening, or there's this digital conversation that's happening that I'm not a part of anymore. I'm not at the center of the conversation, so it does raise stress and anxiety and worries about relevance. And so I think we need to also, at the same time, when we build our digital capacities in the technical side, on the adaptive side, we need to build church cultures that are resilient, honest, brave, courageous, and normalize failing fast and iteration. So change is fast, change is not slowing down, right? In our culture and our technologies, everything is going to be move faster. So just like there's Moore's law, whereas like, the speed of things, when you talked about microprocessors, doubles every few years. So it's faster. And we need to be resilient enough to meet that change, and honest enough to say, hey, like maybe this worked for a long time and maybe this isn't working now, or maybe there's a better way to serve and to reach the people that we're trying to reach and serve. And so our staff, not exactly for this reason, but I just thought would it be a good thing for us to do. We just finished this book group on Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. We read it as a staff, and it was awesome. And we're going to kind of be digging into a lot of the themes for the remainder of this year. So I'd really recommend, if you, I know we had never done that before, but if you have kind of a staff learning group, book group kind of thing, I'd really recommend that. And there's a lot to that book. It's really well written. It's and everything. And what we realized is over the last 4 or 5 months, like we've been reading it together, and there's still so much for us to reflect on. So we're going to build that into like our staff meetings and stuff. So technical change and digital capacity and adaptive change and building resilient and flexible church cultures. So one of the steps forward that we've taken at our church, which not everybody is necessarily in a place to do, but this has been our experience. We just hired a digital communications specialist, Emily Bristol, who I think is on this call. So welcome, Emily. Emily's been with us just about a month now. So during the pandemic last year, we were in a transition process here too. So we were doing kind of transition stuff during a pandemic, which was quite something. But one of the things we identified was like our administrative staffing really needed to evolve. And so last year we kind of reorganized, restructured our church office space, and we hired a business manager, which we had not had before, which has worked out really well. And then we said, we'll fill out these kind of other positions as we, kind of go along and things start to reopen again. And over the course of that, it was very clear. I mean, I thought I'd really like to have a digital communications person, but it became very clear, like this was not just sort of a wish, but a necessity for us in terms of what we wanted to be able to do. So we created this digital communication specialist position, which I think has got to be kind of an early adoption kind of move for us. And I expect a lot of these kind of positions to actually be created, or, people's roles maybe to be readjusted to accomplish that. But we created a job, we created a job posting, we put it on Indeed. And just so you can see, and I'm happy to share with Bob the whole document in terms of how we put it together. But in terms just of the job responsibilities, these are the things that we identified that we really needed somebody to do. And I'll say for the last year and 15 months, it's been me and our field education student. So, I'm right there with you. There was not a lot of offloading that was happening. So we were mostly doing it. So worship materials such as PowerPoint presentations, working on our congregational website. At the beginning of the pandemic, we redid our whole website, kind of recognizing a couple things. One, we needed something that was much more user-friendly for us to manage and was going to be really good for sharing lots of videos. We knew we were going to create a lot of videos and content. And one of the things we recognized about our church website when the pandemic hit was almost everything on the church website was about what happens when you get here. And then we realized, well, when people can't get here, what are we saying? What are we going to do? It's going to be a while. So we tried to background some of that kind of very descriptive text, largely text, and foreground a lot of content, videos, which I'll share some of which with you. So people could come onto our site, kind of learn about us, get a feel for us, maybe learn some things, watch some things we've recorded, both worship and educational, formational. So foregrounding that kind of content. And then we also have cemetery and preschool websites, which I also created. So keeping an eye on those. Our social media right now, we just use Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Our Office 365 space. In 2019, we adopted a new church database, which I highly recommend and love, called Breeze. It's all cloud-based. So we moved from Shepherd Staff to Breeze. So it's a cloud-based, and it's got an integrated online giving and financial side to it, which works great for us. We love it. Very affordable. Create graphics, which we definitely have struggled with. Support the ministry staff and lay leaders, and advise the pastoral teams on things that we could do. And we wound up creating this as a 20-hour-a-week position. So we had already freed up space in our administrative staffing, and we had like basically 30 hours of time that were kind of available to us to craft in the way that we thought that would be most useful. So this is what we put together. Happy to share the whole thing with Bob and circulate it. And Emily's been with us for a month, and it's like a godsend. It's just really been great. And I'll share some of the stuff that we're starting to work on. We need to also think about outfitting spaces for hybrid gatherings. So probably, well, I don't know, a lot of churches have kind of figured out live streaming in the sanctuary, which we do, and we're set up now that the camera is up in the balcony. So last Sunday we had people inside for the first time in 15 months. So by and large, we've kind of been working through our worship spaces, but one of the things I want us to work through next is our other spaces. So how can we have hybrid meetings, because now people are like, boy, it's really nice to meet from home. And it's nice to be in person, but it's nice to have the option. So in a meeting space, can we set it up so that we can have people here, not just like in front of, our own computers, but kind of have a hybrid meeting space in our room where we do adult forum, the lounge. Can we set up so that people can Zoom in or be in person and have a good experience? But some basic things like Wi-Fi is important. Having good Wi-Fi is important. Like you don't always have to like provide all the equipment and so forth. Like if you give people a good signal at your church, they can use their devices and help you communicate and share. I know some churches use a Mevo camera, which is a handy portable live streaming camera. We've gotten kind of one of these portable speakers, which is not really a digital per se, but like it's one of these speakers that you carry, you pull around like a piece of carry-on luggage. So we realized we just need something that's way more flexible and portable. It's got a Bluetooth connection and a microphone, and that solves a lot of problems for us. Having designated photographers or live streamers, thinking about installing video conferencing equipment for meetings information. That's kind of a next step for us. And then remembering to post materials online. So if I think we've become used to recording lots of things. So like capturing the content, which is something I've been kind of been preaching about forever, but capturing your content and putting it available online. So, I think half the people that registered are probably going to watch this afterwards because Bob's recording. So keeping those folks in mind as well. So figuring out spaces in other parts of our church. And our goal, I would say, which is an ambitious goal, and I'm not sure, quite how to do it all as yet, but is really creating a digital church campus where there are these different points of connection. And so we have this church property, we have this church campus where lots of things happen in different ways and people connect in different ways, and really pushing that out into a digital space so that we have the sense of a digital campus as well. Now, big evangelical churches are way, way ahead of most mainline churches on this. So there's a lot to learn, but I just like this idea of a campus as a place where people can gather, connect, in passing or in much more intentional ways, and that it's an extension of our physical church campus into a digital space. So some kind of first ways of getting at that. I'd recommend you check out White Rock United Methodist Church in Dallas. It's a really cool church with an amazing story, that kind of a church that kind of came back from the dead. Introduced co-working into its space, a community garden onto its space. There's a great video, which is way too long to show, that kind of tells some of their story. And you might not pick all of this up from their website, which I do recommend you check out, but their social media platforms are really good. They're really good at creating content. And one of their goal is to create a digital campus. And you can sort of see how they're starting to kind of build that out with kind of podcast conversations on video that they're hosting, things that their staff are putting out for kids and families. And White Rock is definitely a place they've got a second, essentially, campus now. And the backside of that campus has an enormous space where they're going to do a community garden to help with food insecurity in their community. So that's a really cool place, really worth checking out. I met with a couple of their pastors recently just to pick their brain about kind of how they were living into this digital reality. And if you just watch what they're doing, there's a lot of great stuff that you might want to pick up on. And one of my favorites, if you've ever heard me talk before, is the Monastery Society of St. John the Evangelist in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And, they're incredible with, they've got these monks. They're so smart. They're so wonderful. They're so wise and spiritual. And they do an incredible job of capturing that kind of life of the monastery and making reflections available, sermons. They have something called a brother give us a word, where if you subscribe by email, there's a word of the day and just a sentence or two about it that's picked out of their sermons. They do series that are free to use, like video series, all while really being very protective of the monks' time, energy, attention, but sharing the wisdom of that. And that's their web address. And so here's this small monastery in Cambridge, but they have this amazing reach and had this much broader sense of who belongs to, the monastery, who is attending. And now they've started live streaming right in there, which they never did before, but they live stream their services now with a kind of a camera that's up among the arches above the space, and you can attend worship there as well. So they have a monastery in Cambridge. They have a retreat house on the North Shore, north of Boston. And then they've got this kind of digital space too that they've really cultivated long before the pandemic, but gives a sense of like there's this kind of campus, this wider sense of community and belonging. So those are two really good, really excellent places to keep an eye on. So as part of that, kind of digital campus idea, I think the place where I'm starting is really thinking about digital welcome and digital membership, and being aware that now we have many ways for people to attend, contribute, participate, belong. So in terms of digital welcome, we've been learning about this as we go. We realized that like we did Ashes to Go on Ash Wednesday, where people drove through the church, and we realized other people have been attending. We don't even know who they are, but they drove through for Ashes. So we got to kind of meet them in person and chat. And we realized we just didn't have a way for people to, outside of the YouTube chat, to which they weren't chatting with us, to really get to know them. So we created this welcome page on our website, which is udlc.org/hello. We realized we should really just have a page for welcoming people who find themselves in that kind of role. So even just in what we say here, we're grateful to be connected. We recognize that people relate to our church in many different ways, including online. Your presence really matters to us, and we want you to know that you belong, and we're excited to connect and support you in your faith journey. Whether or not we ever meet in person, we want you to know that you belong at UDLC. And on this page, if you were to scroll down a little further, we created a little online form where people could say, how have you been connecting with us? It's sort of like we have these little attendance things we pass in the pews still in church. We call them the friendship tablet. And it's sort of like an online friendship tablet or connect card, if you have those. And this comes from a church in Georgia. I totally love the idea of what they were doing with that. So we created our own version. How are you connecting? How might you like to be connected? How can we pray for you? How can we support you? Would you like a pastor to contact you? That kind of thing. And then below that, there's kind of a collection of resources from the website, which is like kind of about Lutheranism and, about me and the staff and something else, like stuff that would be kind of a little more relevant to if you were just dipping in. And when we worship on Sundays, this is now part of what we do. Like during the offering time, when we pass the friendship tablets in the pews, we say, please visit the website at udlc.org/hello. And we'd love to be more connected to you. That's one of the things we're trying to do, and, trying to kind of keep it at the forefront of our minds as much as we can to provide that point of connection. we also hosted something we called a Zoom. We called it a Zoom. It was a Zoom gathering after church, and I called it the Newish Members Gathering because we had people who were going to join, and then COVID hit, and then people who have started attending and joined during COVID, and people who have been attending and waiting to join until after COVID. So we had a Zoom gathering for those folks, and that was really fun because, you know, we had so much to share in terms of like, how did you find this, and like, why'd you, you know, how did you find us, and how'd you get here, and what are you thinking, and how's COVID affected you? And so we were kind of doing these newish members. We did this newish members thing, and that was really cool. So I can certainly see hosting stuff in the future like that to connect with people who are online. We're also creating new categories, literally, like this is a screenshot from our database, Breeze. And, you know, during the pandemic, we created this non-member live stream attendee designation as part of the participation. And, you know, eventually, well, this may morph into, you know, member digital, you know, or member active, you know, like this will probably morph, but we kind of realized we needed a way to track who people are. I mean, people have been sending in offerings. So they're attending online, they send in an offering and a check, you know, they have their name and contact information. We put them in our database, you know, and so we can send them a statement. And then like, how do we designate these people? Like, so we created a new designation. And I think this will be something that evolves. But for now, it's just kind of like interesting how sometimes it's the nuts and bolts of things that you do that sort of like from when we did this, it was like a reflection to me, like, oh, right, like this is a new thing. This is a new category. So how do we keep track of that? How do we formalize it or institutionalize it? So this will probably be something that evolves for us, but like literally in our database, this is kind of what we're doing. So we're creating new categories for how we think about people who are connected and belong. And oftentimes the question I get with all this is, you know, is a financial question, right? So there's the kind of financial question of the investment in digital, right? So whether it's staffing, whether it's equipment, you know, cloud-based services, software, like there's that kind of thing. And then sometimes we kind of get to this point and people will talk, you know, kind of ask about, well, like what about giving? What about money? What about, you know, the financial model of membership? So we start tinkering with membership. You know, our financial model as a church is based on the sense of membership as contributing and communing and sharing our time, talents, and treasure, right? So, I mean, one of the things we found certainly in the past year was we have people who are worshiping with us who are out of state, who contribute, who give online, and who even mail offerings in. So it's definitely been, you know, we've taken a hit because of COVID, definitely. But we've also kind of received gifts from people well beyond, you know, our orbit here in Upper Dublin or the Philadelphia area or Pennsylvania, people contributing to our ministry. So that's been cool. Like we would do this for our members anyway. People are able to participate. And so that's a great thing. And we'll say last year, we actually paid off our mortgage last year. We had a donor make a matching gift and say, you know, I'll match up to $200,000 to help pay off the mortgage. And this was crazy. And it was before COVID. And then when COVID hit, I was like, you sure you want to do this? And said, yep, might not be a better time. So let's do it. And we did it. And there were a lot of people who don't go to our church that gave to that campaign because we were online and we were live streaming. And, you know, I think as much as we could be or knew how to be generous with our ministry. And so when we're thinking about financial membership and financial models, I come back to this wisdom from Jamie Coates from Society of St. John the Evangelist. He's just a genius about development work and fundraising work. And this quote, which you've probably read while I've been yammering on, you know, is basically saying like, my job is to fundraise, but mostly I'm just giving away. I'm giving away the brother's wisdom, you know, for free. And in trusting that in this gift economy that he calls it, that as we give things away for the sake of God's love, it flows back to us. And the book he pointed to which is a really dense book, I will warn you, but has some really great nuggets in it, is called The Gift, Creativity, and the Artist in a Modern World by Lewis Hyde. And it's kind of the kind of foundational book about kind of gift economy, which there's all kinds of economies we're talking about now, the gig economy, right? The thank you economy, and now the gift economy. But I do think when we are generous with our gifts, our time, our ministries, it does flow back. And I mean, Jamie did an incredible job. I mean, he was their development person and kind of became their evangelist and faith formation person as a way of saying, how do we build these relationships with with donors, with people who care about the monastery, who'd want to support the monastery. Let's make the monastery available to them in the ways that we can. So there is, I think, kind of this virtuous gift economy cycle that is very real. And Jamie, I think for me in the church circles, is kind of the best example of that. So, okay. So you got to love your content. I love the content we've created during COVID, which was new, but also kind of captured content. So like right now, all of you are sitting on a lot of content. You've recorded lots of stuff. So you have all this content that, like us, that maybe you've only shared during worship, during your live stream. Like how can we reuse that content? How can we package that content? What kind of content could we create moving forward? And I know a lot of people have done lots of cool different things. I've seen a lot of your stuff. But some of the examples that we've used, like during COVID, I kind of finally got around to this project of doing the 2-minute Lutheran. And one was, it kind of got sparked because somebody contacted me, and there's just not a lot of easy resources when it's like, what is a Lutheran? We're really wordy people, and it's kind of hard to just boil down. And so I'm finally going to do this project. So I created this 2-minute Lutheran series, which is a series of 2-minute videos on about all kinds of different stuff on Lutheranism. And I did it with that guy in mind. His name was Sam. But also, we sent it out to the congregation, and the congregation like loved it. Like they love this series. When are you going to do the next series? Like, well, give me a minute. But so we created some new content based on kind of what we were seeing. We just couldn't invite somebody to an adult forum, couldn't invite somebody to like a, pastors kind of hosting something on Lutheranism. Like we couldn't do any of those things. So, people were asking questions, boom, we posted it online. This is one of my favorite projects from this last year. One of the series we're doing is called Faith in the Future. And it's kind of thinking about how are we going to be the church in the 21st century? And we've sort of, all right, this is a phrase I've learned, extroverting the process, courtesy of George Detweiler. It's like kind of like we've been in this transition process. We're going to do visioning process. Like let's make it available to people as much as we can. Write about it, share about it, preach about it, and so forth. And so we did this Faith in the Future series, and we're bringing people in to talk about that in different ways. So one of them we did was with Lisa Kimball and Tricia Lyons, talking about faith formation and evangelism in the 21st century. And we did this just like we're doing now as a Zoom meeting. And we captured it, we recorded it, we posted it. So now we've got this essentially blog on our website where I'm writing some stuff, some of the stuff you're hearing today. And we're posting videos of stuff we've hosted. So we've done stuff on innovative ministry, Lutheranism, faith formation, evangelism. We're going to have one coming up on youth ministry. And we're creating this really great library of materials, that people can be a part of live or Zoom, but that live on our site. One of the cool things that we wound up doing this year was we have a band that typically plays at 2 of our services. And for years, I've been like saying, we should do like playlists and set lists on Spotify so people could know the music. And, it just never got traction. But they basically had to record themselves, so we could show it on live stream. So they've recorded over 60 songs at this point, and on video and on our website. So they had to do this but now we have all of these videos and we have all of this music. Um, so we have a YouTube playlist with all of the songs. And then on our website, we've kind of packaged them together. And again, like we were doing it because of the live stream, but now here we're sitting on all this, which is great. I also downloaded all of the songs as a play, onto my Apple Music. So when we have stuff at church, I can just Bluetooth it out to a speaker and kind of, play some stuff while people are arriving, while people are leaving. So now we're sitting on all this great content that we can share. Some of the things that we've done during Lent, we did this series called Faith with a Twist, which was yoga and spirituality, which Jen Sprague led. And so that was like 6 weeks of Faith with a Twist. So it was a time limited series, and it was kind of very kind of it was self-contained, and it was just for a period of time. And we did it for Lent, but now we've gone back and scrubbed it. So it's like an evergreen content. It's not just for Lent anymore. We did this great virtual Christmas pageant, which was so fun. And we did an Easter pageant as well, because it was so cool with families doing the stories in their homes. So we've got this kind of content. So for next year, for like Christmas, Advent next year, as we're able to share some content that we've created, for evangelism, for welcome, for publicity, going into next year. And then just recently, we started this sermon snippets thing. So we send Emily our sermons from Sunday, and she creates the snippet. This is really pulled out of Society of St. John the Evangelist. They do this in a different way, but she captures some of the sermon and she puts it into a graphic, and then we share it online. And the response to that's been really good. And then probably like a lot of you, like we already have a podcast, which is always posted, but we have to do a better job with titles and descriptions and stuff. But you've got the sermon, you spend a lot of time on the sermon, then how can you take that sermon and then, okay, it's a podcast, okay, now it's a graphic, like break it down a little more, so you're getting more and more out of the content. And of course, like we know, the more bite-sized the content, the better. And then I would just say, like, as we're thinking about moving forward, honing our practices of digital ministry, living into this hybrid reality. I've talked about a number of these things a lot. They're all in Click to Save, but thinking about how we offer hospitality, how we care for God's people, how we form disciples, how we build community and make public witness. These are all things we wrote about in Click to Save, in 2012, and then again revamped in 2018. And I don't care whether you buy the book or not, but we'll just say it's easier for me to say there are chapters that are full of examples for ministry leaders, taken like just within the last few years, of people who are doing those things in really interesting ways. So while in Click to Save, the technology certainly changes, the kind of overall approach has actually borne out really well. And these arts of digital ministry are things I think that we should be investing in, like how as our own ministries, whatever our role is, become more hybrid, thinking about how do I offer hospitality in person? How can I offer hospitality online? How do I care in person? How do I care online? Forming disciples or forming faith, how do we do that in person? How does that translate online? And it's not just, of course, putting a camera up in front of something that's happening, right? How do we create experiences that are good for the people who are in person and also good for the people who are online? And building community, we've had to do a lot of, and in making public witness, we've seen even more and more ways in which we can use, digital media for social justice and public witness. So I think, just kind of beefing up on those a little bit, or just thinking about how do these things cross kind of or hold in this hybrid threshold would be good to know. And then finally, I love this quote from Gordon Kaufman, who died some years ago, was not writing about technology, but I just love the way that he kind of says, this is a precarious and dangerous project, repairing and rebuilding the very boat which keeps us afloat. But of course, it is even more dangerous simply to sit complacently in that boat as it sinks, or to oppose or otherwise obstruct those seeking to rebuild it. If it has gotten into waters which it cannot manage, something must be done. And so that's really what's happening. And we thought we just thought we had a lot more time. And so we procrastinated. But we thought we had a lot more time to do these things. And it turns out we don't. And, you know, it's not just about connecting with people who are beyond our congregations, but, you know, it's definitely one of the things I'm seeing now, right, is that there are a lot of people who are still reluctant about getting together in person, right? There's part of that that's going to take some time. But also our church members have become accustomed to having an option with worship, whether it's online or now in person, right? Or do I have to drive over to the council meeting, or do we have a way in which I can like not have to make the drive and zoom in and could still be like a meaningful participant? So I think that this experience has changed the way our people think about the way that they engage with the church. So it's not just about who may come in our doors, but it's for the people who are here. And then just a reminder, like this is just the beginning. You know, the internet is still really new. These technologies are still really new. It's not even 50. You know, the internet's like 35 years old. It's you know, from the mid 90s. So it's not even 30, 35 years old. Like the, you know, smartphones are new, 15 years old, you know, 20 years old. Like we're really at the beginning, and we were already at the very beginning then. You know, it's sort of the early days of like the printing press. Nobody exactly knew what to do with it until, you know, I mean, Martin Luther was the best example of harnessing it in a certain way and harnessing it for the gospel. But there was a period of time when people didn't know what to do with it. And we're sort of finding, I think even before the pandemic, we're finding our way with that. So we're still really at the outset, at the beginning of this time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, stop talking. Thanks for everybody listening and your patience. And Bob, I'll give it to you. And if you want to.
Sure. Thank you, Keith. Thank you for a very information-rich presentation and very enjoyable. One of the things that I'm not seeing the person who asked the question still in our participant list, but I thought I would throw this out because I think it's relevant since we're all at very different places in our congregational stature and in our congregational lives. And the question was, it dealt with staff, you know, and it basically was looking, you know, here's a church, for example, that I guess is still in an interim or a bridge situation for a couple of years. They have just a part-time staff office administrator. And so I'm wondering your thoughts on how those of us who have fewer resources might be able to translate some of these ideas into reality in our places. I think you're muted.
I muted myself. I mean, I think partly is maybe developing our own skill sets, or maybe having conversations like, hey, you know, I'm like a pastor. I didn't get into ministry to do video editing, but clearly like this is something that is we're going to be at for a while. Like having some conversations about maybe my role is different, or my role is changing, or my role is evolving. I'm not sure that we've, in the throes of the pandemic, actually have had an opportunity to have those conversations. Like we've just been doing what we've needed to do. So how can we have conversations to say, you know, this is taking up more of my time. I just can't keep adding. So what can adjust? And you know, if you're the person that knows the digital stuff a little more, could volunteers help with other things so that kind of frees you up to do that? Or you know, are there volunteers or people within your church who could take some of those things? And now, like, these are, you know, and you don't have to do all the things all at once. I think like I've always said, like, picking one thing and doing it for a while and doing it well and learning from it, that is a good thing, you know? So a lot of the examples I've used, like happened over the course of like the last year and a half. And they were almost always like aha moments, like, oh, we have this now, or, oh, we could do it this way. Or, oh, what do we do with this? You know, or, oh, we need a way for people to connect with us digitally. So there really has not been, it all looks like really thought through at this moment, but most of those were little like, oh, duh moments that we kind of pulled some things together. So I think doing one thing and doing it well is a very good thing, and you learn from those things, and then you move, forward. Yeah. So I know it's a tough spot actually being in transition when we were during pandemic, which was not, not ideal in most ways. Actually worked out great it happened to work out great for us, just because we were kind of in that mode and looking at it already. I'm listening. I have to get my power cord. It's on the other side of the room. So I'm here and I'm listening. So.
Okay. Another thing that might, I think, be another way to think about that, Bishop Davenport has continued in meetings that we have been in with rostered leaders, but I think it certainly applies to all of us in this area. Collaborate. Are there ways that perhaps several churches could share someone who's doing, digital communications, or share someone to prepare things for screens, or to take sermons and create, those little graphics, which I really love, the sermon snippets.
There's, of course, like over time, we've talked about, there's lots of conversations about churches sharing administrative staff people, right? Like, I need somebody half-time, you need somebody half-time, or sharing equipment and that kind of thing. This is a kind of role that actually is like way easier to share because it could all be remote. So this, if you needed somebody for 10 hours and somebody else did, you could, I was talking with some pastors kind of along the way who were kind of thinking through this, but, if you find the right person, that's even easier.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. John Baskin, you're still in the room?
I am. I'm here.
Okay. You had asked an earlier question, connecting this with our webinar the other day with Dr. Babinchak about COVID. So would you like to pose your question?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Pastor Anderson, for very informative. Real quick sidestep. A quick shout out to the AV geeks from my high school days, because we finally been exonerated. So recognizing the important points that Dr. Babinchak made the other evening, I'm not sure whether you were on that. I'm watching it on recording, so I wasn't present for the actual, but he made some interesting points. So the question is, how can the now digital church become the new welcoming church when we open our doors officially? And some have already. What will the welcoming package look like? And you covered some of those points, but do you have any other visionary things that you might want to add?
Well, I just think it's going to be interesting to see who comes back through the doors, and how they come back and how often they come back. And I mean, if you've, whatever you've wound up doing and creating over the course of this year, I think all helps with having people have a real sense of the congregation. You can't fake that many worship services. Like, you're creating so much content. It's like, we have some really kind of nice, professionally done, like, videos, which are really nice, and I still love them. But, you watch watch a live stream worship service. That's, kind of who we are. Like, you just can't fake that forever, or polish it up forever. There's just too much to do. So, kind of long talked about, the new narthex is online, and I think that's still the case. So I think, we can really tell the story of our congregations in lots of really cool, interesting, and appealing ways. Like, I think this, this has been so hard, but I think this time is really going to help us, as long as we kind of hold on to keeping our eyes on, not letting this go. So I think it's going to help. I think people are really hungry for community, hungry to be together. maybe there are going to be theological questions that emerge, kind of in the aftermath of the pandemic that people are going to be asking a little more. And I think, we can be there for them.
Okay, thank you. Before we jump back to a couple of specific worship questions, I realize I skipped over in talking about the staffing issues. I saw Sonia in the chat did talk about the fact that her position was actually created, and the vision was for it to transition and evolve, which I'm sure it really did this last year. Sonia, would you want to share a little bit about how that looked like and what worked and what didn't?
Well, yeah, it has been evolving. When they hired me, they said that they wanted to transition from more of a parish secretary than to a parish administrator. So to take a lot of that administrative details off of the clergy and put me in that kind of position, that's the reason I accepted the job. So and then yes, of course, it's really evolved lately during this year, with Zoom and all that kind of things. And but we do have a team of volunteers who do the Sunday morning things, because on Sunday morning I'm at Augustus, a different church, being the director of Christian Ed. So we have a group of what we call the stream team, and they're really dedicated volunteers, and they're great. So I don't do a lot of the digital stuff except for posting everything on social media, putting it in all the communications. We have an email that goes out once a week, other emails, Facebook group, Facebook page, Twitter, which no one follows yet, and Instagram. And so, doing all of that. And so it has evolved, and it makes it more enjoyable. So I would say, if you only have 1 or 2 staff people and you're worried about the budget for, digital ministers, don't completely discount the idea of getting training for the staff you have. And then, as Pastor Anderson said, volunteers can stuff envelopes and do things like that. And sometimes there are people that are really willing to do that. And then it makes the job more interesting for the staff that you have if they can get training, because it's not something you can. Technology changes so fast that it really is a matter of training. You don't need people with a college degree in computers, so much as you need training that happens all the time. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So there are a couple of different worship questions. One came from Beth Anderson about trying to maintain interest in Zoom experiences. Beth, would you want to unmute and ask your question more fully?
Yeah, my question is, people are really engaged on Zoom with one another, and there are people, say, who may offer as lector, but aren't ready to be in church. And so I've been thinking of ideas that I'm wondering, are they just for the moment? Like, do we invest in a monitor or a TV screen where someone on Zoom is able to read a lesson and the people in worship can see that person? And so I guess I'm just wondering what extent, like, how robust do we go with technology, and is it going to be a short-lived concern? And I just have all kinds of hang-ups also in terms of whether someone offers to be lector or not from being online. All the people who do remain online, their experience, I really want it to be as participatory and for them to feel like they're part of something rather than just hitting click, sitting back and watching. Even if that's what they've been doing all along, I think there's a sense of participation and knowing that they're seen by others. And once we go to the hybrid, I worry that feeling that people have now is going to go away and it's going to be less meaningful for them.
Yeah.
Okay. Keith, before you answer that, this flows right into a question that Joshua put in the chat. So Joshua, are you still online?
I am still here.
Yeah, if you'd be willing to ask your question, then we can kind of tackle these two together.
Yeah. Again, similarly to full involvement, services are moving towards everywhere, towards being in person and online. And I think we've all acknowledged that digitality is as real as it can be. But we're going to start to have services in person now that include things like the Eucharist. And whoever's in the building can participate in it. And our bishops and powers that be have largely, for the most part, advised against us offering that to people at home. So my question is, Lon, how do we make people feel like they can fully participate when we turn around and say, well, except you online, don't do this part? Because it sounds weird to just tell them that.
Right. Yeah, these are great questions. I mean, this is going to be the trick of, like making sure that both experiences are good experiences. Like we had people in the sanctuary for the first time this past Sunday, which was great, but essentially they're watching the live stream in person, like on the screens in the sanctuary. So they're sort of like a live studio audience at the moment, and I told them like, hey, it's going to evolve, right? It'll be, as we go along, it will definitely become a little more in-person oriented, right? But we can't forget about the people who are going to be, behind the camera and want that to be a good experience. So, we're starting to think about things like when we welcome people, like, I mean, we're just like living into it like week by week at this point, but right, when we're welcoming people online, we've been in the mode of welcoming people through the camera. So that's where our mindset is first. And it's like, oh, and you're in person, great. But like the welcomes to both audiences, right? We stream on YouTube. So we have a YouTube chat, which like Zoom chat, like we started off doing, is really robust. It's great. It feels like us, it's interactive. And, when we get to the point when I can't be doing, be paying attention to the chat and everything else in worship, we're going to need a way for somebody to curate that chat on Sunday mornings so that they can interact. I know a lot of, some churches have that already, like a digital minister person for Sunday mornings. We take prayer requests at this point online through the chat and then name them in the prayers of the people. So there's definitely like a little procedure that's got to happen there. Or even just like remembering once people are back to look at both the people in person and the camera. Like Sunday, I was like, doing that to make sure like I'm trying to make eye contact with everybody as well. So yeah, I guess I'm really grateful to have this kind of time to practice on, without like huge numbers of people to kind of figure out like how that feels. But I think having somebody to continue to be on the chat is going to be important for us, and sounds like it's going to be important for you, Beth. And and having people still feel like, hey, we're going to pass the friendship tablet. We've got an online friendship tablet. We've got the hello page. But that is definitely going to be a trick. What I don't want to ever wind up with is like this sense of you're just watching from the balcony and you're overhearing or overseeing what we're doing, and you're not like a participant, or it doesn't feel like you're a participant. We do online communion. We've been doing it since Easter last year. So we'll kind of we'll do online and in-person communion this coming Sunday. So we'll kind of figure that out, but it doesn't take as long, right? Because we're not people aren't coming up. So it's I don't know, it's a little different. People have communion kits when they come in, they have something at home. So it's like we're not playing a song, but when people are coming up for communion later, once we kind of get to that point and there is like a song, then I guess we would invite people to like have communion as they listen to the music, as they see people coming to the table. But yeah, there's going to be a whole set of rubrics we're going to have to come up with for it.
Well, we Lutherans love rubrics. So
rubrics, the red italics.
That's right. There is a conversation in the chat going on about using prepackaged communion and some ways, some nuts and bolts of that. So if you're interested in that, check out the chat. Beth, I'm curious what you were doing on Zoom, what worship looks like on Zoom.
We follow, the liturgy is on slides, but then I don't share the screen when I preach. So I see everyone and they have the opportunity to either spotlight me, I hope not, or, see all those who they're worshiping with. We have an usher who is my co-host, and there's a spot during intercessory prayers where the usher may then instead of the assisting minister who is actively leading worship with prayers and all that, there's a spot during intercessory prayers where the usher offers prayers that have been shared in chat. So there's that, but there's also, honestly, one of my very favorite parts of Zoom worship is before worship has begun and everyone is joining on. And in the last couple of months, I had started to realize a regret I had over the year, wishing that like something I had learned in restaurant work, where the owner of the restaurant would keep a little journal about the weather each day and the income that day and all that. I was wishing, and now we have someone on council who's sort of our little history journalist person, and they just take notes on the conversation before worship begins, because I started to realize that the conversation was shifting during the pandemic in terms of what people's concerns were and what they were excited about. And so it was really prominent when I heard them talking about where can we schedule a vaccine? Where can you get it? How did you do it? And sort of that scurry. And then, yay, I got it. So then we advanced to that point. And then there was a Sunday morning before worship where everyone was talking about they couldn't wait to get together and to eat together. And they all started talking about different cocktails. And I thought, oh, it was just so humorous to be hearing that. And I thought to be able to look back on that and see how those conversations transformed during the pandemic, I just thought would be a cool historical record. And so that's some of where I see there's just been some really precious things happening over Zoom. And that's part of what has held people together, I think. And so I fear that there will be some real disappointment if that kind of stuff isn't happening as we go into hybrid.
I see, and you also left a comment there about when hybrid, we have sent Zoom into breakout room before continuing with the communion liturgy in person. Tell me about that.
So we would, we had 2 hybrid services in the fall. And we had a camera. I had an usher on the side working with my computer and running Zoom. We had a camera on the pulpit and a camera on the altar. And the camera on the altar faced the congregation and the railing. So the people on Zoom were able to have an up-close visual of blessing of the confirmands. And then we ended, then I think we end that worship on Zoom with extending the peace, and then the folks would go be invited into the breakout room. But some people live close enough, and with the timing, they're able to then come and receive communion after the in-person group has had communion. And because of safety protocols, we had people come forward, receive communion in those disposable, prepackaged containers and walk out the door with it. So we had the blessing and the prayer and everything before they left with it. And so that just kept things moving and it also kept people leaving in an orderly fashion rather than clumping up and socializing and breaking all sort of distance rules. And then I found people then were arriving from Zoom, and many of them didn't wait outside. They came in because the space was empty, and they came in and received communion and then went back out the door. And so that's how we've been having communion since January. Every other week, people come after Zoom and receive. And the other thing I wanted to say about someone's comment is I realize, depending on your location, it might not be reasonable for people to come right after worship to the building. But now that we are having communion, I feel that then I can also bring communion to people like we would typically do for bringing for homebound, because we are having it, we're consecrating it. So
it's so fascinating, the opportunities for creativity that we've been given here. And I do know of congregations that kept worship on Zoom, and then they would get together, generally outdoors, for just communion, which was another interesting way of handling that. The small faith community that I pastor generally met around a living room having conversation. So we were able to do that, having facilitated conversation rather than sermons on Zoom, and hardly missed a beat. But that might be another way to Zoom is really good for interactivity, whereas there are a lot of live streaming platforms just to send the worship out. And I think we've all been trying to figure out how these things work over the last year. MB posted another interesting question about Zoom and hybrid. So MB, do you want to unmute and join the conversation?
Sure. I'm a PCUSA pastor of two small churches in Northwest Ohio, and I'm not exactly sure how I found this webinar.
Well, welcome.
I'm so glad to be here. And I'm actually doing create your own study leave for a couple of weeks, so that's probably how I found it. But it's worked really well to use Zoom. The challenge has not been how do we make Zoom good. The challenge has been how do we make in-person as good as Zoom when you're coming back into the sanctuary and you've done a good job with Zoom. And we do have a lot of interactivity, especially on the prayers of the people and passing the peace, and we've been able to do communion in both ways. Bring your own elements at home, because the consecrating the elements is, I can consecrate from afar, and so it's just a different context. But the challenge is the transition, because we're never going to be back exactly like we were before, because we're always going to have this online piece. And then the privacy issues, it's, recognizing that we've never streamed the Zoom on purpose because we've privileged that sharing. And now we'll let anybody come, but we need to, we give them the information to come. It's not just publicly posted. So we're trying to make those shifts now. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Yeah, actually that makes a ton of sense. And I've struggled with the same thing. We have lots of content in discussions of scripture, but we've also, because they get so personal, we've decided not to post them. So now the challenge is how to create other content. And that, I think, is, you said two really interesting things. One, the first is it's really important. We're not going back to the same thing. And I also read that Carrie Nieuwhof article that Keith mentioned at the beginning. And I think it's really important to realize that we're in a different place now. We aren't what we were. And just going back to it is not really going to work terribly well for our, for our growth, for our survival, just even for our health, because we're now, in many cases, multiple congregations. Bob Masser, you had your hand up. You're still muted, Bob.
Getting there. Okay. A couple of comments that were made. I put some things in the chat. One of the things Pastor Keith had mentioned, we started with what we're calling a live stream studio audience this past Sunday. One of the advantages we pulled out of that is that now we had somebody that did responses like, Lord be with you, and also with you. We have a microphone to pick up congregational sounds in the sanctuary. So that's going out on the live stream, which we hope is going to make people on the live stream feel more like part of the service. Pastor Keith mentioned that we use YouTube as our live streaming delivery platform and that people put things in the chat. One of the capabilities is somebody sitting in the sanctuary attending the service can bring the live stream chat up on their phone and participate in that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a way of kind of bringing the congregations together. And then one of the previous speakers that had a question, talked about, that they were able to have somebody read a scripture over Zoom. We use OBS, which I did a presentation on a few weeks ago. And one of the capabilities we have is the ability to zoom into the OBS for live stream so that we can have a remote speaker actually zoom into the live stream to do a presentation. We've used it a couple of times. We don't regularly use it. And now that we have people in the sanctuary, we can also put that up on our sanctuary screens. So that's another way of integrating the live stream congregation with the in-person congregation.
Yeah, I think this is really the challenge, because it seems not right to have just an in-person studio audience, but on the other hand, we don't want to make it just a broadcast to people who are on the outside. So how do we build those connections? It's going to be very interesting as we move forward. I see another comment about live streaming. Facebook Live is another good platform for that interactivity. They also, I think, do a really good job at in real time doing captioning of your program, or close to real time. So that's another option. It is important, as Keith said, find someone to monitor the chat, because the pastor or the director of the live stream are probably not the best people to do that. They've got other things to pay attention to, right? Mm-hmm. So are there any other questions that have come up now since we've been talking, or ideas you want to share? Okay, really good questions and ideas. Keith, any last words you want to share?
I'll just thank you all for being here and for your ministry, and just so grateful for, I get to see a lot of the things that you guys are doing online, and I'm so grateful for it, and grateful for all of you. And, please take care of yourself and hang in there. And, we'll all get there. Not all at once, but we'll get there. So.
Well, and I think the important thing too is we can help each other. I would love to see, I know everybody's pushed to about 120% these days. But if we can help facilitate ways for, to build relationships where maybe a stronger church can adopt a church that needs to learn from them, or just help out, with answering questions, please do. You know where to reach me, certainly. rfisher@sepa.org. And I'm glad to take questions in between. And also, 2 weeks from today, we'll be doing a similar thing with folks from Faith Growth who'll be working primarily with websites and how to make your website more effective in this time. Looking at Upper Dublin's website, I think, is a really good way to get some ideas as well. They've done a really good job. And Keith, can you make the PDF of your presentation available?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll send that to you.
And for those of you who are here from other areas, we will be happy to include you on our email list, because we do a support group and learning group every Thursday morning for folks in our synod, but we're perfectly open to opening that up. John Ware, I see you put your hand up.
Yeah, excuse me. I just wanted to comment on the live captioning from my experience. I am the one that sits in the background and monitors the chat and does the responding and so forth for Little Zion. And we started back with our outdoor service in the beginning of May. And prior to that, being at home on a much larger screen was one experience. But when I'm sitting there with my iPhone and trying to follow the chat, and I'm watching the captioning go across, a couple of things that I noticed. First, the captioning was very good in terms of keeping up with what was being said. It was so good that you couldn't read it that fast. So therefore, it wasn't that good. And the other problem that I noticed on, looking at it on a smaller screen was that it was annoying, actually, because you couldn't read it, and it was taking up some of the visual space that would have been nice to have been able to see without it. So I don't know what you do with that, but that's just two comments with regard to the captioning.
Yeah, the technology is both too good and not good enough
Right.
When it comes to that. And I think it's a matter of your context. If for some congregations have already been providing, sign language interpreters because of people with hearing issues, and it is possible to do picture-in-picture, or to even do a second stream, perhaps, that has that more prominent. But yeah, we are learning so many new things, and I'm so excited to see what you're all doing. And I just want to share this. MB added a note in the chat, which I think is really helpful. She said, "I think one of our next moves will be deconstructing the recordings of worship and editing them into smaller, easier to watch and interact with programs, and then stream them to YouTube." And I think there's a lot to be said for that. The environment's totally different online, and most of us find, if we've looked at statistics, that the curious tend to drop off very, very quickly. It may hide ourselves in worship because if our faithful people are watching the whole worship, that may not be as obvious, but I'd say that's a great thing to experiment with. Do some shorter pieces, maybe even audio, video snippets of the highlights of a sermon rather than the whole sermon, and see what kind of response that you get. And she says, "I've been watching and learning a lot from YouTubers, especially DIYers, who are doing amazing things to build community around their brands." And I would say, too, that is really good advice. Learn from people who are using the medium well. YouTubers are way ahead of the church in terms of this, and so there's a lot to be learned. And then do the discernment of, is this something we can faithfully use or not? But I think that we're in for some really exciting times, and so I'm looking forward to, over the next few months, learning from each other and sharing ideas. So, Keith, I saw you pop up. Did you have something you wanted to say, or?
No, I think I just muted myself. So
Oh.
the opposite. Yep.
It's weird that when you mute yourself, your picture shows up on
Yeah,
screen.
right.
It's very, very odd. Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here, and we will have our typical just free-for-all gathering next Thursday morning, and as I said, in 2 weeks we'll be having a presentation on web pages. So watch your email for information, and again, feel free to reach out to me, rfisher, RFISHER at sepa.org, and I'll be glad to chat with you and share, try to answer questions or share resources with you. So everyone have a blessed rest of Thursday, and we'll see you soon.
Take care, everybody.